If you ever find yourself wandering into a forgotten town with no name, remember this. The rules are not suggestions. They are the only reason I survived. When the job offer came, I thought it was a joke. A handwritten note slipped under my apartment door read, "Night Watchman wanted. Remote location. Generous pay." Beneath it was an address I couldn't find on any map. I was broke, jobless, and drowning in debt. A prank or not, I was desperate enough to follow the trail. The directions took me deep into the countryside. Towns thinned to clusters of houses, then to isolated gas stations, until there was nothing but empty fields and dense forests. My GPS died an hour into the drive. By the time I reached the destination, a town with no name, the sun had sunk below the horizon, leaving the place shrouded in an oppressive, moonless dark. The town didn't look abandoned, but it didn't look alive either. Rows of decaying buildings lined the main street, their windows covered in grime, yet I felt eyes watching me. A flickering streetlight cast a cold yellow glow over the scene, illuminating details I wished I hadn't noticed. Doorways smeared with dark stains, strange symbols scratched into the pavement. At the heart of the town stood a squat brick structure, the watchtower. Its single bulb buzzed and flickered overhead as I parked my car. A weathered sign on the door read, "Guard post. No entry without clearance." But the door was unlocked, and no one was there to stop me. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and rust. A dusty desk sat in the corner, stacked with faded logbooks and a single sheet of paper taped to its surface. Scrawled in uneven handwriting were the words, "7 Rules to Stay Alive." The title alone made my stomach churn, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. Beneath it, the rules were listed, each one more cryptic than the last. Number 1, do not speak to the shadow at the gate. Number 2, keep the lights on at all costs. Number 3, if you hear a whistle, hide immediately. Number 4, do not enter building 13. Number 5, never look the man in the mirror in the eye. Number 6, don't ignore the phone if it rings after midnight. Number 7, when the bell tolls, pray it's not for you. I read them over and over, trying to make sense of the bizarre instructions. Just as I was about to dismiss the entire thing as some cruel initiation joke, I heard a sound, a faint whistle. It echoed faintly through the room, distant yet sharp enough to raise every hair on my body. The sound was wrong, like a warning whispered through clenched teeth. I froze, gripping the desk for balance. Then I saw it. A shadow outside the window, unmoving, yet unmistakably human in shape. I had no idea what I had gotten myself into, but the rules didn't seem like a joke anymore. The whistle outside had barely faded when I returned my attention to the list of rules taped to the desk. My heart thudded against my ribs. Whoever wrote these wasn't joking. The shadow outside the window hadn't moved, but it was there, its form slightly distorted by the grime on the glass. I forced myself to look away, keeping my breathing steady. The list demanded my attention again. Rule 1, do not speak to the shadow at the gate. That night, I learned what the rule meant. Around midnight, I began to hear faint knocks on the watchtower door. Soft at first, then louder, more deliberate. Peeking through the blinds, I saw the figure. It stood just beyond the perimeter of the faint light, its shape impossibly tall and thin, with edges that wavered like heat on asphalt. As if sensing my gaze, it stepped forward, coming into view. It wasn't human. Its body was cloaked in swirling darkness, faceless except for the faint glimmer of 2 pinpricks where eyes should have been. I froze as a voice whispered, clear as if it were right beside me. "Let me in." The voice wasn't normal. It wasn't one voice. It was dozens, overlapping, young and old, calm and furious. I clamped my hands over my ears and backed away from the window. "Let me in," it repeated, louder this time. The sound filled the room, clawing at my sanity. I didn't answer. The rule burned in my mind. Do not speak to the shadow. After an eternity, the whispers stopped. When I dared to look again, the shadow was gone. I didn't sleep that night, and by dawn, the memory of the voice felt like it had been carved into my brain. Rule 2, keep the lights on at all costs. The next night, I understood this rule's urgency. The watchtower's power ran on an old generator in the basement, As the night deepened, the single bulb above me began to flicker, casting strange, stuttering shadows on the walls. Then, with a dying buzz, it went out. I grabbed the flashlight from the desk and rushed to the basement. The darkness was suffocating, pressing against the beam of light. The generator stood in the corner, a clunky relic covered in grease and dust. It had stopped running. As I fiddled with the switches, I heard movement upstairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I froze, listening. The steps grew louder, descending the staircase. My flashlight trembled in my hand. "Just a second," I yelled, though I knew I was alone. I frantically restarted the generator. It sputtered and whined before roaring to life. The lights snapped back on, and the footsteps stopped. When I crept upstairs, the room was empty, but the faint smell of sulfur lingered in the air. Rule 3. If you hear a whistle, hide. Immediately, I was still shaken from the night before when I heard it again. The whistle. It started faint, like a distant train. I bolted under the desk, clutching the flashlight with white-knuckled hands. The whistle grew louder, high-pitched and mournful, reverberating through the walls. Then came the sound of heavy boots, dragging across the floor. I stayed silent, my breathing shallow, as the footsteps came closer. I peeked through the sliver of space between the desk and the floor. A figure walked past. A man, or something like one. His face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, his coat trailing behind him like smoke. He carried a lantern that cast a dim, sickly green light. As he moved, his head jerked toward the desk. I bit down on a scream as he crouched low, his face mere inches from mine. He sniffed the air, his cracked lips curling into a grotesque smile. "Not tonight," he whispered, his voice a rasp. He straightened and walked away, the whistle fading with him. By the time morning came, I felt like a man walking the edge of an abyss. The rules weren't just precautions, they were the only thread keeping me tethered to life. But deep down, I knew the worst was yet to come. The list wasn't just a guide. It was a warning, and I still had 4 rules to go. The list of rules had saved my life, so far. 3 nights, 3 encounters, and I was still breathing. But the town wasn't done with me. Each night chipped away at my sanity, and every morning brought new dread. When I returned to the desk that 4th evening, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A faint, hand-drawn map of the town. It was crude, marked with symbols I didn't understand, but one building stood out. Building 13. The 4th rule flashed through my mind. Do not enter Building 13. I stared at the map, feeling the tug of morbid curiosity. Why was it singled out? Why had whoever wrote the rules gone to such lengths to keep me alive, only to plant this seed of temptation? But I had no intention of breaking the rule. Not yet. Rule 4. Do not enter Building 13. The night started quietly, though quiet had a different meaning here. It wasn't the peaceful stillness of a calm night. It was the unnatural absence of sound, the oppressive hush that made your ears strain for even the faintest noise. Around midnight, the silence broke. It started as a low hum, vibrating through the air. I looked toward the window and saw faint lights flickering in the distance near Building 13. At first, I thought it might be a trick of my exhausted mind, but the lights danced erratically, growing brighter, and then vanishing. I turned away, trying to focus on the map, but the lights didn't stop. They pulsed, almost like they were calling to me. The temptation became unbearable. I grabbed my flashlight, a crowbar from the corner, and stepped outside. The air was colder than it should have been, and each step felt heavier than the last, as though the town itself was trying to hold me back. Building 13 loomed ahead, its facade partially collapsed, its windows dark and shattered. When I reached the door, I stopped. My gut twisted with an instinctual warning. Don't go in. But the lights inside flared, casting flickering shadows that danced like figures in a macabre waltz. I pushed the door open. The interior was worse than I'd imagined. Dust hung in the air, thick as smoke. The walls were covered in strange, childlike drawings of stick figures with hollow eyes. Some were scratched so deeply into the plaster they seemed to bleed. I ventured deeper, my footsteps muffled by the debris-strewn floor. The lights that had drawn me in were gone now, replaced by an eerie glow that seemed to emanate from nowhere, Then I heard it, a faint whisper. "Help us." It came from the corner of the room where a shattered mirror leaned against the wall. As I approached, the whispers grew louder, overlapping voices filled with anguish and desperation. The mirror reflected the room perfectly, except for one thing. There were people in the reflection. Dozens of them, staring back at me with empty eyes. Their mouths moved in unison, their voices merging into a single plea. "Join us." I stumbled backward, tripping over debris, and ran. As I bolted out the door, the whispers turned into screams, a cacophony of agony that chased me all the way back to the watchtower. Rule 5. Never look the man in the mirror in the eye. I slammed the door of the watchtower behind me, my chest heaving. For a long moment, I stood in the middle of the room, trying to calm my breathing. The mirror in Building 13 was burned into my mind, but I shoved the memory aside and focused on the next rule. I avoided the small mirror mounted above the sink as I splashed water on my face, but my curiosity got the better of me. I glanced up, just for a second. I froze. My reflection didn't move. It stood there, grinning at me with a malevolence that didn't belong to my face. Slowly, it raised a hand, pointing at the list of rules on the desk. "Look closer," it mouthed. The reflection's hand moved toward the desk, and against my will, my eyes followed. My body felt disconnected, like I was a puppet being controlled. There, on the edge of the list, was a new note scrawled in the same uneven handwriting. "The rules are not just to keep you alive, they are to keep us out." My reflection laughed silently, its shoulders shaking. Then it vanished, replaced by my own pale, terrified face. Rule 6. Don't ignore the phone if it rings after midnight. I was still reeling when the phone rang. It was an old rotary phone, the kind you'd expect to find in a museum, sitting on the desk as though it had always been there. I hadn't noticed it before. The ringing was deafening in the silence. My first instinct was to let it ring, but the rule screamed in my mind, "Don't ignore it." I picked up the receiver with trembling hands. "Hello?" At first, there was silence. Then a voice crackled through the line, distorted and faint. "They're coming for you," it said. "Who?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "They want you to break the rules. If you do, they'll take you like they took us." The line went dead. Rule 7. When the bell tolls, pray it's not for you. The last night was the worst. I sat in the watchtower, clutching the crowbar like it was a lifeline. The air felt heavier than ever, suffused with an unnatural stillness that pressed against my chest. Then it came. The bell. It wasn't a normal bell, it sounded ancient, like it had been forged from the bones of the earth itself. The sound reverberated through the air, shaking the walls of the watchtower. My heart pounded as I realized the sound was coming closer. I peeked out the window and saw them, shadows, hundreds of them, moving like a tide through the streets. At their center was a figure cloaked in black, carrying a massive bell that swung with every step. I pressed myself against the wall, praying they wouldn't come for me. But the bell tolled again, louder this time, and the shadows stopped. They turned toward the watchtower. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." The figure raised a hand pointing directly at me. The shadows surged forward, their movements jerky and inhuman. I ran. Bursting out of the watchtower, I fled into the darkness, my flashlight bouncing wildly. The shadows pursued, their whispers filling the air like a swarm of insects. I don't remember how long I ran or where I went. All I know is that eventually, I found myself at the edge of the town, where the road stretched out into the forest. I didn't stop. The truth of the town. When I finally reached civilization, I was half mad with exhaustion. I tried to explain what had happened, but no one believed me. Later, I returned to the spot where the town had been, desperate for closure. It wasn't there. The road ended in an empty field. No buildings, no watchtower, just an expanse of grass swaying in the breeze. But as I turned to leave, I saw it. The same shadowed figure standing at the edge of the field, watching me. And in the wind, I heard the faint toll of a bell. The rules had kept me alive, but they hadn't saved me. The town wasn't a place. It was a trap, a living nightmare that could reach beyond its borders. And I knew, deep down, that it wasn't done with me yet. What would you do if you found yourself in a place like this? bound by rules you didn't understand, facing horrors you couldn't explain. Would you follow the rules to survive, or take your chances with the unknown? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, not every place on the map is meant to be found. Some towns are better left lost. The night shift at Ravensmoor Prison had always been considered a dead-end job, perfect for someone like me who preferred solitude and the eerie silence that came with the old walls. I had taken the position without much thought, seeking refuge from the chaos of the outside world. Little did I know, Ravensmoor held secrets that would blur the line between reality and nightmare. Rule number 1. Never enter the cell block. After hours. From the moment I started, the first rule was etched into my mind. The cell block was off limits, a relic of darker times. The guards rarely ventured there, and maintenance seldom addressed the persistent damp and decay. Curiosity gnawed at me, especially during the loneliest nights when shadows seemed to dance just out of sight. One particularly stormy night, the power flickered, casting long, wavering shadows across the building. I was alone, the silence thick except for the occasional drip of water echoing through the halls. A strange noise emanated from the direction of the cell block, a soft, persistent tapping that sounded almost like Morse code. My heart raced as I considered investigating, but I remembered the rule. Reluctantly, I retreated to my office, shaking off the unease. Rule number 2. Don't respond to the whispers. Weeks passed, and the noises became more frequent. Whispers filled the corridors, indistinct but insistent. At first, I dismissed them as the building settling or the wind playing tricks, but the whispers grew clearer, often carrying my name or eerie messages. One night, as the clock struck midnight, the whispers seemed to converge around me. They urged me to find the key and release them. My rational mind fought against the rising panic, reminding me of the second rule: never respond to the whispers. Yet the allure of uncovering the truth was too strong. Ignoring them became increasingly difficult, and sleep eluded me as the voices echoed in my mind. Rule number 3. Do not disturb the resting grounds. Ravensmoor was built atop old graves, an undisclosed fact that only the most seasoned employees knew. The maintenance logs were sparse, but those who had worked here longer whispered about restless spirits and unexplained phenomena. The third rule was clear: do not disturb the resting grounds. One evening, driven by the whispers, I decided to explore the basement where the old utilities were housed. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. As I descended the creaky stairs, the temperature dropped, and the whispers grew louder, guiding me deeper into the bowels of the prison. In a hidden chamber, I found remnants of the old prison life: rusted chains, broken cells, and faded inmate records. At the center stood a large iron door, its lock missing. The whispers crescendoed, compelling me to push the door open. Ignoring the third rule, I breached the threshold. Rule number 4. Never let them out inside. The chamber was vast, filled with shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Figures materialized from the darkness. Former inmates, their faces twisted in eternal anguish. The whispers transformed into voices, pleading for release. Panic surged as the realization hit me. By opening the door, I had disturbed something ancient and malevolent. The fourth rule echoed in my mind: never let them out. But the spirits, driven by years of confinement and torment, surged toward me, their ethereal hands reaching out. I tried to retreat, but the door slammed shut, sealing my fate. The chamber pulsed with dark energy, and I felt an invisible force binding me. Desperation took hold as I searched for a way to contain them, but the spirits were relentless, their sorrow turning to wrath. Rule number 5. Seal all entrances before dawn. Remembering the fifth rule, I frantically searched the chamber for any means to seal the entrance. Time was slipping away. Dawn was approaching, and with it, the spirit's power would grow. My fingers trembled as I located an old, dusty ledger on a pedestal. It contained names, dates, and cryptic symbols. As I deciphered the symbols, a pattern emerged, a ritual to bind the spirits back to their confines. The process required precise actions and unwavering focus. The spirits, sensing my intent, intensified their assault, whispering threats and promises of eternal torment. With shaking hands, I began the ritual, chanting the incantation inscribed in the ledger. The room responded, the air thickening with supernatural resistance. Shadows writhed, and the spirits howled in defiance, but I persisted, driven by sheer will. Rule number 6. Never lose hope. The struggle seemed endless, but I clung to the 6th rule, never lose hope. Doubt crept in as exhaustion set in, but the thought of eternal darkness kept me going. Each word of the ritual felt like a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink. As the first light of dawn seeped through the chamber's cracks, the spirits began to wane. Their forms dissipated into the ether, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The door creaked open, revealing the basement's gloom. I collapsed, gasping for breath, the ledger clutched tightly in my hands. The spirits were contained, but the cost had been immense. The rules were clear, and I had learned them the hard way. Rule number 7. Never forget. In the aftermath, life at Ravensmoor resumed its monotonous rhythm. The whispers had ceased, and the cell block remained undisturbed. But the experience left an indelible mark on me. The 7th rule was simple, yet profound. Never forget. I kept the ledger hidden, a constant reminder of the night's horrors. The rules were not mere guidelines but lifelines, ensuring that the balance between the living and the dead remained intact. Yet some nights, when the wind howled just right, I could swear I heard faint whispers, testing my resolve. One evening, a new employee started, eager and naive. As I showed them around, I recounted the rules, emphasizing their importance. But beneath my calm exterior, I feared that forgetting was a possibility, that the fragile barrier might one day crumble again. Ravensmoor Prison stood silent, its walls holding countless stories of pain and regret. As the night clerk, I was the guardian of its secrets, bound by rules that ensured my survival. But in the darkness, where shadows linger and whispers beckon, the rules serve as both protection and prison, a delicate balance I was sworn never to break. The storm that had once threatened to unleash chaos had passed, but the remnants of that terrifying night lingered. Each rule was a testament to the horrors that lay beneath, a guide to navigate the thin veil between safety and oblivion. As I sit in my office, the moon casting elongated shadows through the dusty windows, I ponder the fragility of our existence. The rules were established for a reason, born from experiences long forgotten by the world outside. They are not just instructions, but lifelines, binding me to Ravensmoor's haunted legacy. In the quiet moments before dawn, I reflect on the nature of fear and control. The rules, once mere restrictions, have become pillars of my reality, shaping my interactions and decisions. They are the framework that keeps the darkness at bay, ensuring that Ravensmoor remains a silent sentinel of its tormented past. But I can't help but wonder about the origins of these rules. Who first discovered the true nature of Ravensmoor? Were they born from tragedy, necessity, or something more sinister? The answers elude me, lost in the labyrinth of time and memory that Ravensmoor embodies. Days turned into weeks, and the routine continued, but the weight of the rules bore down on me. Each one was a reminder of the night's ordeal, a promise to uphold the fragile balance. The boundaries between duty and survival blurred as I navigated the haunted corridors, ever vigilant against the encroaching darkness. One particularly quiet night, as I reviewed the ledger, a chill swept through the office. The whispers returned, softer this time, almost like a reminder. They spoke of gratitude, of peace achieved, but the underlying tension remained. The rules, now ingrained in my psyche, were both shield and shackle, guiding me through the spectral maze Ravensmoor had become. In moments of doubt, I find solace in the structure the rules provide. They are not just preventatives, but a framework of understanding, a way to coexist with the remnants of Ravensmoor's past. Each rule is a chapter in the prison's story, a narrative of caution and respect for forces beyond comprehension. As months turned into years, my role evolved from a mere clerk to the keeper of Ravensmoor's legacy. The rules became my compass, steering me through the supernatural challenges that occasionally surfaced. The cell block remained untouched, a testament to the boundaries I upheld, but the ever-present whispers served as a reminder that vigilance was paramount. The 7th rule, to never forget, became my guiding principle. Memories of that fateful night were etched into my consciousness, ensuring that complacency would never take root. Each shift reinforced the importance of the rules, embedding them deeper into my being. One night, as I prepared to leave, I noticed a faint light emanating from the cell block. My heart raced as I recalled the first rule. Compelled by a sense of duty, I approached the entrance, the whispers echoing in my mind. The light flickered, revealing the outlines of figures long gone. I stood my ground, remembering the seventh rule: never forget. Instead of acting on impulse, I reaffirmed my commitment to the rules, allowing the spirits to remain confined. The light dimmed, and the cell block returned to its dormant state, the balance restored. In the end, Ravensmoor Prison is more than an abandoned structure. It's a living entity, a repository of souls bound by unspoken laws. As the night clerk, I am both guardian and witness, bound by rules that transcend time and reason. The 7 rules are my anchor, ensuring that Ravensmoor remains a place of silence, its secrets preserved in the darkness. Each night, as I navigate the haunted halls, I carry the weight of responsibility, mindful of the rules that safeguard both myself and the restless spirits. The boundaries are clear, the consequences dire, and the rules unwavering. They are the keys to survival in a place where the past refuses to stay buried, where every shadow holds a story, and every whisper carries a warning. Ravensmoor stands as a monument to forgotten souls, a reminder of the thin line between order and chaos. As long as I uphold the 7 rules, I can navigate the darkness and maintain the fragile peace that allows me to survive each night. But the ever-present fear lingers, a testament to the power of Ravensmoor and the unyielding rules that protect us all. In the silence of the night, I reflect on my role and the lessons learned from Ravensmoor. The rules are not just guidelines, but a covenant with the spirits, a pact to honor their existence and maintain the balance. They serve as a constant reminder of the horrors that lurk beneath the surface, ensuring that I remain vigilant and steadfast in my duty. As dawn breaks and the first light filters through the barred windows, I find solace in the knowledge that the rules have kept the darkness at bay once again. Ravensmoor remains silent, its secrets intact, and I, the night clerk, stand as its silent sentinel, forever bound by the 7 rules I don't want to break.